Hi there folks, welcome back. We continue now with the training, and the subject of today's material is the basics about sound. I'm going to share a couple of things relating to sound. The first thing we look at is what exactly is sound, or then a sound wave. A definition once again found online. The word sound is a noun that refers to vibrations that travel through the air or another medium and can be heard when they reach a person's ear. I repeat, vibrations that travel through the air and can be heard when they reach a person's ear. That is what sound is. It is literally a vibration, a movement in the air. We're going to look quickly at what does a sound consist of. What do sound waves consist of? How are they put together? What are their characteristics? After that, we're briefly going to look at how a microphone converts sound to electrical current, and also how a speaker converts that electrical current back to a sound. I'll be showing some images on the screen that you can have a look at as we discuss this matter. The images should assist in clarifying what we're talking about. Sound, a sound wave, because as we have now discovered, it moves as a vibration through air, and it moves as a sound wave. If you think about a wave in the sea, a sound wave is similar in air. It has its peaks, its valleys, and it moves through the medium. It consists of the following four important parts or characteristics. Firstly, the wave has an amplitude. That is literally on the diagram how high or low from the center line it moves. Amplitude is an indicator of the energy of the wave. Quite literally, in our real world terms, that means how loud the sound comes across. The bigger the amplitude, the louder the sound. As you look at the wave moving across the 0 point, the further it goes up and down from there, the more energy that wave possesses, which means the louder the sound is. Next, we look at the frequency. Now, you'll notice we indicate frequency and wavelength. The two are quite closely related to each other. Frequency is how many times the full waveform shape passes by a certain point in space in 1 second. The faster it moves, the higher the pitch of the sound. The slower the frequency of the sound, the lower the pitch of the sound. A sound like "ee" would have a relatively higher frequency. In other words, its waves would move past a certain point very quickly. A sound like la would have a lower frequency. It would move past that point slower. The wavelength and the frequency are closely related. They are in fact the inverse of each other. In other words, the faster the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. The slower the frequency, the longer the wavelength. Faster frequency, higher pitch sound, shorter wavelength. Slower frequency, lower pitch sound, longer wavelength. I'm not going to get too deep into the mathematics of wavelengths, of the timing, of the speed of sound and all that, but using the speed of sound, which is 331 point something per second, you can actually determine the length of a wave based on its frequency, and the other way around. Knowing the wavelength will help you determine the frequency and that type of thing. I'm not going to get too deep into the mathematics behind that. You are welcome to read up more about that, or even post a comment to this video asking about it, and we could include it later in a future course. Some more detail about the maths of wavelengths, frequencies, and determining certain things. Suffice to say for the moment that A sound that is very low, namely with a longer wavelength, will more easily pass through objects. A sound with a higher frequency, a higher pitch, thus a shorter wavelength, will pass through objects with less ease. To give you an example of that practically, when you listen to the sound of my voice as I'm speaking right now, there are many characteristics to my voice. There are some low, some mid-range, and some high frequencies. Specifically the S's. Listen to the S sound. That is a relatively high frequency sound. Fast movement, fast frequency, short wavelengths. And have a look at this. Testing, 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 testing. Testing, 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 testing. You see the difference. My hand is literally thick enough to prohibit the high frequencies from passing through it and reaching the microphones on these cameras. The lower sounds pass through. Again, testing, testing. You hear that it is unclear, but you can hear my voice. When I take my hand away, the top end frequencies, the shorter wavelengths, they pass to the microphone. They're not restricted by my hand anymore, and you can clearly hear what I'm saying. This experiment that I've just done will become quite important later as we're doing sound, as it relates also to speaker placement and the distance to your audience and things like that. Higher frequencies tend to drop off quicker than lower frequencies. Again, because of their length and their weakness, the air literally makes them fade out faster than a lower frequency. For this reason, often as well, if you live near a club or disco of some type, or an entertainment venue, you will find that you more regularly hear the kick drum and the bass in your home as an irritation. Let's say you're trying to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're having a party at that entertainment venue. What you will hear mostly would be kick drum and bass guitar. The reason is simple. Those two instruments create the lowest sounds, typically in modern music. Lower sound, slower frequency, longer wavelength. Those waves literally travel through the walls of that venue, even if they have closed it up. They travel through the walls and through the thinner material of that building. Say they have a ceiling, but it is not a solid slab of concrete. The sound travels right through the ceiling, through the roof tiles or the corrugated iron that may be used as a roof, and travels along. It goes through the walls because it's a longer wavelength, a lower pitch and a slower frequency. The high ends of the stuff you don't typically hear. That also relates a lot to acoustic design in a studio environment such as this, as well as sound proofing. There is a clear definition difference between acoustic design or acoustic treatment of a room compared to the sound proofing of a room. So, getting back to the wavelengths, the frequencies. There's a difference between sound proofing and acoustic treatment. And higher frequencies die out and get prohibited more easily than lower frequencies, which tend to be able to pass through certain objects. Then lastly, I want to just mention as well that there is something called a period to a wave. That is typically the time it takes for the entire wave to pass by a point. Frequency is how many times the full waveform shape passes by a certain point in space in 1 second. Period is the time that it takes for the waveform to pass once by a certain point.